We're also simulcasting live on Facebook Live, and we have with us Mayor Lee, Vice Mayor Cobb, and City Manager Bob Cowell. So we'll just ask everyone, all of our reporters, to mute your line, and then we will do questions after, and you can put them in the Zoom group chat, and I'll kind of moderate that. So if we're ready to start, Mayor Lee, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Tiffany. Let me say good afternoon to everybody. In response to challenges residents and businesses may experience in paying taxes during the COVID-19 health crisis, the city is offering temporary relief. The city is extending the deadline for business and personal property tax payments by 1 month. Originally due on May 31st, they are now due June 30th. Business and personal property tax bills will be mailed as required on April 15th. But again, they will not be due until June 30th. City Council has also affirmed that by code, the city treasurer has the authority to establish a payment plan for those who are delinquent in paying real estate taxes. For COVID-related reasons, the treasurer may waive penalties and fees associated with the delinquency if the bill is paid within the next 30 days or a payment plan is agreed upon. And that's so important that everybody remember that. I encourage anyone in such a situation as it relates to real estate taxes to contact the treasurer's office about the option of paying delinquent taxes or to set up a payment plan. We remind citizens that payment options for these city taxes include mailing your payment to the treasurer's office, putting your payment in the drop box located across the street from the municipal building, by phone using a credit card, or online at www.roanokeva.gov/payments. Details for these payment options are posted on the city's website. And we understand the difficulty of these times and want to work with you while at the same time maintain our ability to provide essential services that you depend on every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. I want to share with you some additional changes that Valley Metro has announced regarding its transit operations, and with appreciation for our transit operations and for all of our drivers, we want to share these additional changes with you. The latest change will be implemented beginning this Thursday, April 9th. The schedule will adjust to hourly, meaning no peak schedule, which will enable buses to run in tandem on certain routes at certain times based upon demand, so that the number of passengers permitted on any one bus will be limited to 9. This action is in response to the governor's executive order and aligns with guidance provided by the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. The Starline trolley will operate with 15-minute headways all day versus 10 minutes in the peak. These are the latest of a collection of operational changes made to keep operators and passengers as safe as practical while continuing to provide this critical service. The other changes that have been previously announced include free fare or fare-free transit service provided on all Valley Metro services. This eliminates passengers stopping at the fare box, which is adjacent to the bus operator. Front seats in all transit buses are closed to provide for social distancing between passengers and bus operators. Transit passengers are required to exit the bus through the rear doors. Passengers are encouraged to limit contact with the bus operator and travel for essential trips only. Signage has been placed on all buses encouraging behaviors prescribed by the CDC, and enhanced cleaning of the buses at night and during operators is occurring when possible. Also, radar buses continue to run on their normal appointment-based schedule. FAQs, or frequently asked questions about these changes, have been included in information provided in various media releases and are on the city's COVID-19 website. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Vice Mayor. Just a couple of updates on items that we've already shared previously with the public, but just to remind everyone relative to the budget. Of course, we're trying to really work at this point on two different budgets. One of those is the one that we're currently in, the FY20 budget, which still runs through June. And as we reported at the most recent council meeting, and we are anticipating somewhere around $8 to $9 million in lower revenues received than had been projected or expected. Fortunately, as we had shared with the council, all of us in the community were experiencing a good year up until February, March timeframe. And so that has allowed us to absorb a certain amount of that fall off, but it has also necessitated us to freeze basically all of the optional or discretionary expenditures that we have. We have a hiring freeze in place other than for public safety and social services. And of course, we also recently furloughed a number of employees. Furlough was more related to the fact that our facilities were closed and there are no programming activities going on. But certainly there is a cost component with that as well. So the FY20 budget, we continue to work on that, and assuming that we don't suffer any additional revenue changes than what we are nearing the point at which we feel like we can balance that to the point at which we need to be able to do so. At the same time, we're working on developing the FY21 budget, which of course normally we would be presenting at this time for council consideration and ultimately the public hearing. At the last council election, meeting, we actually moved that schedule so that I'll be presenting the budget on May 18th, and that will be followed by the public hearing about 10 days later, and then ultimately presented to the council for action at their June 15th meeting. So we've pushed it out basically as far as we're able to, and the reason for doing that was to give us enough time to, in effect, completely recreate a new budget, but also to see if we would gain any additional information relative to the revenues and how we may better make projections for the upcoming year as we go forward. Currently, our estimate is somewhere around $6 to $7 million less revenue next year than what was anticipated that we were presenting previously. What that amounts to is best case scenario is probably flat budget, meaning FY21 revenues. In best case, we'll probably match actual revenues in FY20. Of course, unfortunately, expenses, even as controlled, don't necessarily stay flat. So when you think of things like healthcare increases, utility increases, just contractual obligations, all of those will continue to increase. So what that's requiring us to do is, even with a flat budget from revenue standpoint, it's requiring us to still cut further so that we can offset what will be those fixed increases in costs. And so we're working on that as well with our directors. And of course, I believe it's May 4th is our next briefing to council, where we will share with them what we anticipate those reductions to be as we again try to wrap up the budget proposal that will come on May 18th. And as I mentioned already about the furloughs, and unfortunately as a part of this, we were required to temporarily furlough employees that are involved in our recreation program in our library area, where they're actually delivering programs for folks that come into our rec centers or into our libraries. And of course, we're unable to do that for the remainder of this fiscal year. And then there were a couple of, maybe as many as 7 solid waste employees that work for us under an agreement with a temp agency, also who were previously informed that they were no longer able to use their services because actually we had to go from 3 individuals in a truck to 2 so that we could maintain some distancing within those. Fortunately, a couple of those folks have actually been picked up in our parks department on our mowing crews, so we're able to actually keep a couple more of them back at work, and hoping not to make any more of those kinds of adjustments as we go forward in the rest of the year. All other city operations remain pretty much as they have been for the past couple of weeks. everything remains closed through at least April 30th, although obviously with the governor's order extending out into June, probably as I approach that date, I'll be extending that those closures again into May. All official meetings of the city have been canceled, with the exception of the city council at this point. At some point in May, we may need to start kind of figuring out how we assemble some of those groups in some fashion to meet in May or June. You think of things like the Planning and Zoning Commission, or you think of the ZBA, those caseloads are starting to back up. And obviously there are folks that have development decisions that are resting on those. So we may have to start moving in that direction at some point. But for April, currently nothing is going to change associated with that. So those are just quick kind of updates on where we are in terms of the budget as well as current operations. And I believe at this point, we would welcome any questions for myself or the mayor or the vice mayor that you might have on any of these topics, or anything else that you have on your mind. And I think Tiffany's asking you all to type those in, I believe, if you have any of those questions.
All right, Claire with the Roanoke Times. Governor Northam today announced that the June primary will be pushed back 2 weeks, and he recommends the May election be postponed until November, which would need to be changed by the General Assembly. How does the city plan to handle this?
I will let either the mayor or the vice mayor answer that one.
Well, of course, we're always ahead of the curve. Our municipal elections will be in November. Now, I'm not actually sure about the primaries. I mean, is that being required to be moved also to November? I'm just hearing this, so I'm not abreast of that. Maybe the vice mayor may know something about it.
My understanding is that if that primary is pushed back 2 weeks, that the governor's office will work with the local election boards and registrars to make sure that that information is communicated in the way that it needs to be communicated. And as the mayor said, our local May election has been moved to November, so we're already in place for that.
Yeah, and I think just to reinforce that point, the registrar actually had just reached out a couple of days ago, anticipating that the Republican primary was to occur, I believe, 1 day prior to the date at which the governor's current stay-home order was to end. And so they were starting to evaluate, because they used polling locations that are currently closed, libraries, schools, those types of things. They were starting to evaluate that. We'll have to see if the General Assembly acts on this request from the governor, how perhaps that may affect, as was mentioned by the vice mayor and the mayor, how that might affect that primary as it moves forward. But for us, we were already anticipating that November election here locally, so it doesn't impact us in that regard, like it will some other municipalities as well. Thank you for the question.
Sure. Anybody else have questions? Media friends are quiet today.
They've covered a lot recently.
Yeah.
We want to let you know that we've been trying to do these every Wednesday and try to capture information that might have occurred either over the preceding couple of days, or that we might be able to announce kind of new on this particular day. And on next Wednesday when we do this, so we'll do this again on next Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we will have the fire chief present as a part of that as well, so that he can share with you some of what's going on in the fire EMS responses to the pandemic that's going on, and of course answer any questions that you might have relative to our preparedness, as well as any kind of other responses that we might have. And of course, just as I say that, Shane posts up a question. So.
Yeah, so Shane with WSLS, sure, I'll bite. How do you think city staff and the health of the city is in general now a few weeks into this, with even more weeks on the horizon?
Yeah, I guess I'd say, health falls into a lot of categories today. So, I would say in the area of fiscal health, we just shared that with you on the budget piece. I think, the entire city, and certainly private sector and households, are experiencing this more than we are, which is, the financial health is shaky right now across all of us, all the sectors. And the longer this goes on, the more risk is associated with that. In terms of physical health, actually the city so far has fared well. I think you've heard the mayor allude to this previously. The governor certainly has, that the more seriously people take the physical distancing requirements, as well as the stay-home order, the greater the chances are that we can sustain whatever may come in terms of the health risks associated with this. You know, mental health, I suspect that everyone is getting kind of weary. I think folks are, this has been going on now for a month pretty extensively, and I think everybody's been operating either at a really high gear, if you're a healthcare provider or if you're a fire EMS person, or even working at a grocery store, you're under a tremendous amount of stress day after day after day. Whereas kind of the flip of that is you've got a lot of folks who actually are at home trying to figure out how they continue to keep schooling for their children, as well as worried about their own jobs. So I suspect the anxiety levels across the entire city are pretty stressed out and pretty thin on that. So, you know, I think for us inside the organization and our health, we're doing well. We do have some concerns that, you know, if things start to really ramp up, our ability to maintain the supply of PPE that we have for even our first responders, that's going to continue to be a concern. But in terms of so far, our efforts at trying to keep people distant from one another, close down operations so that we can keep our buildings, so that we keep doing what we need to without unnecessarily exposing folks to the health issues is working. We've been able to manage that. I don't fool myself though. I know that part of that is because it just hasn't hit here quite like it has other areas. I know that when it really does start to spread here, we will feel that inside the organization as well, and we'll have to adapt accordingly. And Mayor and Vice Mayor, anything else you want to add on that question?
I would concur with your position, Bob. I've driven around to areas, to the playgrounds and the greenways, and it looks like people are following through with our social distancing. And I've been pleased with what I've seen so far, and I just want to encourage our citizens to do that, because I always want to say this, and it's not popular, but we're dealing with life and death issues, and it's so very important. But I've been pleased with what I've seen personally so far.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think I'm seeing people just pull out the stops in terms of creativity and compassion. The level of and expansion of people looking in on each other, checking on each other, finding new ways to connect with each other has been really incredible. And you know, people want to help, and they're looking for ways within the parameters that have been set to help each other. And as the mayor said, I'm so encouraged by that, and really commend our city for stepping up to bring our best forward in this.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
And if not, it looks like, so we will anticipate seeing you all at least by next Wednesday, unless something else comes up and we have to do anything before that. But otherwise, next Wednesday at 3 o'clock, again, we'll do this. And again, we'll have the fire chief present with us, kind of talk about that side of what's going on inside the organization and inside the community as well. So thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, Tiffany, Joe. Y'all take care, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.